Chapter 10 The Club. As I walked out of the classroom, there was Arthur, standing in his finely pressed tuxedo, awaiting any indication that his services might be needed. "Hello, sir," he said to me in his usual English accent. "Are you needing any assistance at this point?" "Arthur, possibly a little lunch," I said. "Is there any food around here?" "Sir," Arthur said with his wave of his hand, "we have a very nice lunch for you right this way." So we walked down the great hallway that took us towards the rear of the main building. There, in a finely laid-out lunchroom, was a beautiful buffet of roasted artichokes, smoked salmon and crayfish, sorted melons, and fresh rock oysters. I sat down and asked Arthur to join me. It was a fine meal for sure, and with all the trimmings fit for a king. Arthur finally took a seat, settling into one of the finely crafted 18th century provincial chairs that adorned the table where I sat. He didn't eat anything, mind you. He just sat with me, and we engaged in some mild conversation. "Arthur," I asked, "could you help me understand why all the servants here at the university are frogs? I mean, there's you, and there's the groundskeepers, the maids, the cooks, and they're all frogs. I see so many frogs. You guys are everywhere. I see these frogs working and talking to themselves, carrying on, crying, as they do. So you would like me to make sense of this for you," he said back to me. "Yes, sir. You see, sir, the frog is a very interesting creation. Did you know, for instance, that during a frog's life it lives both in the water and on land?" "I knew that, but I never really thought about it much." "Well, sir," Arthur continued, "frogs are amphibians, and the word amphibian comes from the Greek word meaning double life. This refers to the fact that during a frog's life, it lives both in the water and on land. One of the reasons we find amphibians so fascinating is this fascinating change they go through. We call this unique change metamorphosis. All the frogs you see here have been involved in one way or another in this extraordinary process called metamorphosis. We are all experts at it. Because of the skill we have and our experience in it, we have been employed here to help the student body understand and deal with their own metamorphosis as well. We know this process better than any living organism, and we have all gone through it extensively. For you, sir, it will be different than for us frogs. For humans, it is simply the act of growing up. But the principle is the same. You will grow and change with the knowledge found here at the University of Life. It is my job, as well as the job of every frog here, to help you to engage in that process." "Wow," I said out loud to the frog. At that moment, the bell rang. "Off you go," Arthur said. "Your next class is about to start in a few minutes." "My next class? Okay," I said back. "Where am I going now?" I thought to myself, there was so much information here. I was spitting just a little. I looked down at my list once again. Last time I looked on it, I thought it said Safety 101 was coming up. Now that I'm looking again, Safety 101 is not there anymore. My next class now is called Reliable Membership. This is where we go. I'm on my way to Reliable Membership 101. I remember reliable membership from the biological dream bubble. It was the second level of the biological dream, right above safety. It seemed to be a very important part of all of this, so I was clearly interested in learning more about it. I proceeded down the long hallway adorned with red felt wallpaper and lined with goblets of imperial gold and silver towards the awaiting classroom. As I walked in, I took my seat, and as usual, right up near the front there, just to the left of the large oak professor's desk. Written on the blackboard in rather bold letters was the phrase, "All people require reliable, sufficient, and not excessive contact with other humans." Alfred entered the room shortly after. He walked up to the front of the room and started to speak. "This material," he stated as he leaned against the desk, "I developed over several years as I pondered, examined, experienced, and resolved the issues of reliable membership. This, I feel, is an absolute biological genetic requirement for human children under 8 years of age, and it is also nice for all humans to have after that age. Older humans can live alone, but in what I call a degraded condition. This seems to be an idea that you can take to the bank. It seems that reliable. I believe this is the function of your middle brain, the limbic system. It appears in mammals as that desire to not be left alone, that desire to be included. I recall the book The Horse Whisperer, how young wild horses on the prairie would be given the choice of submission to the lead mare or being driven away from the herd. They would always choose submission or joining up. Yet the need to be together can be overridden by the experience of unpleasant conditions. Hermits are built by a repeated history of unpleasantness when they try to connect. I will refer to this need to join up as the connection continuum. Childhood is not all one way or the other. I find the best way to express my experience of this basic rule is to speak of a continuum. At one end is absolute unreliability or insufficiency of connection, and at the other is absolute excessive connection. People can find their place along this line, some higher, some lower. As we grow, we sometimes move up and down this continuum. Alfred then turned and put this diagram on the board. As he did, I sat and thought to myself, it was a line that at one end there was no connection, and then at the other end was excessive connection. I think I got it. He also said that we could find ourselves anywhere on that line at one that may need more or less connection. I think I got that part too. You see, the turtle continued as he turned back to the room, many humans receive unreliable or insufficient contact in childhood, and this can be a source of much emotional pain. When an individual experiences too little connection or intermittent connection as a child, its old reactive reptilian brain activates. I call this panic. As children, these people survive by developing what I call clinging skills. These are behaviors of hanging on, standing close, resisting being distant. As these children grow into adults, when they can walk, they develop what I call pursuing skills. These are just adult clinging skills. These behaviors involve following, moving forward, and chasing. A clinging child doesn't want to be put down and runs out of the house and after their parent when left with the babysitter. These same skills of clinging and pursuing, driven by panic, become habits and follow the child into adulthood. When these adults panic, they move towards others, especially their partner. They ask questions, follow, they push toward, they talk at, and in general become invasive of their partner's space. As an adult, this clinging behavior may become very controlling, possessing, captivating, coercing. In excessive cases, it can be a source of stalking behavior. This is your pattern if you often frequently think of or fear your partner leaving you behind. When nervous, you will focus on your partner's evasiveness, withdrawal, and silence. You may also have day or night dreams of safe togetherness, a family living happily forever. That's if you receive unreliable connection. Now we'll cover what happens when you receive excessive connection or unpleasant contact as a child. You see, this causes panic as well. When a child experiences too much contact or painful contact, the old reactive reptilian brain activates. Again, this is panic. Children who experience this develop avoiding skills. These are behaviors that do not invite contact. Even when hungry, these children don't cry. We often call these good babies, but really they are happier when left alone. As these children grow, when they can walk, they develop isolating skills. These are just ambulatory avoiding skills. Isolating involves hiding places, wandering off, climbing trees and not coming down, running away, sitting at the far end of the room, and that sort of thing. These same skills of avoiding and isolating, driven by panic, become habits and follow the child into adulthood as well. When these adults panic, they move away from others, especially their partner. They're quiet, self-contained, elusive, non-talkative, and in general, emotionally cold. This is your pattern if your mind often goes blank when your partner talks, asks, or moves towards you. When nervous, you will focus on your partner's evasiveness, attacking, pushing, and you may dream of peace, quiet, and space. So, where are you? Turtle continued. Take a moment and find the place on this continuum that fits you, as he pointed to the blackboard and showed the line with excessive and non-excessive at each end. Over a lifetime, you may change position. Usually in partnerships, one will be higher on the line and one lower. This seems true for perhaps 80% of couples I see. Are you the higher one or the lower one? How about your parents? Where do you see them in this? Alfred paused for a moment at the front of the room. He then looked up and said, "At this point, I would like to introduce you to two very special friends of mine." Alfred then motioned to the door, and an older frog couple walked in and sat down in the front alongside Alfred, who was standing. They were clearly a couple. They looked relatively happy, but who was I to determine their happiness? So I sat quiet and watched as Alfred proceeded. "This is Max and Minnie," he said, "the Imizors. I brought them in to help show you this thing of getting too much or too little connection growing up. You see, Max and Minnie have been together for a very long time. They have been coming to see me on a regular basis for at least part of that time. Max grew up in a pond where he got little attention. He was a good little frog, but his parents were always off busy hunting flies and swimming with the bogs and really never gave him the kind of attention he needed. Now, Minnie, on the other hand, grew up in a home quite different. She grew up in a fishbowl where she was constantly being taken out of the fishbowl and fondled. There was sparse alone time for her, so she grew up in a place where she got too much attention. Max has grown into what I refer to as a clinger or pursuer. Minnie, on the other hand, has grown into what I refer to as an avoider or an isolator. These are two of the aspects that I would like to cover here. Max and Minnie just sat there through this. I could tell they were probably worked here at the university in some capacity and had gone through this lecture with the turtle many times before. They just sat and listened intently at the words that came from the turtle's mouth. I could tell they liked the turtle. "The problem is this," Alfred continued. "When a clinger gets nervous, they tend to move toward their partner in order to reduce their panic. The avoiding partner seems someone coming and starting to panic, they move away. The clinger sees their partner moving away and moves faster. The avoider runs faster from the clinging person who is now chasing them. The two run toward what in here we call the leaving wall, the wall at the edge of the relationship. In the human world, it is called divorce. Now, when an avoider gets nervous, first they tend to pull back and head for some quiet space. The clinging partner sees the partner moving away and starting to panic, they start to hold on. The avoiding partner feels the holding on and further panicking withdraws firmly. So the two run toward the leaving wall, the divorce wall. These scenarios get played out over and over with no conscious effort, but usually a lot of panic, and always they move towards the leaving wall." Alfred turned and looked admiringly at Max, who was sitting there, moving just a bit in emotional discomfort as the turtle motioned towards him. "Max," the turtle asked, "can you tell the class what it is like to be in your position?" Max cleared his throat, as frogs often do, and began to speak. "From my point of view, as a clinger, the leaving wall scares me. Whenever my partner says, 'I'm out of here,' or 'I can't take this anymore,' or even if she just goes out a little longer than I expected, or she was just quiet, I would start worrying. My worrying always had more or less panic within it. I visualized her leaving me, having an affair, dying, etc. The leaving wall scared me. I did all sorts of things to protect myself from her going over the leaving wall. All of my efforts were temporary fixes, though, and no matter how hard I tried, my efforts seemed to always push her away." "Wow, I got that," Alfred responded. "It sounds like that was very scary for you." "Yes, it was," Max said back as he gazed over towards Minnie's direction. "Is there anything else you would like to add to that?" Alfred added. "No," said the frog. Next, Alfred looked over at Minnie. She was sitting there as well, had the same uneasy look on her face Max had. It was now her time to reveal her sense, and Alfred proceeded. "Minnie," he said, "tell us about your experience." And she continued, "From my point of view as an avoider, the leaving wall was a safe haven. What scared me was the lack of what I call the space wall. The space wall was the one I can get behind to take a break from Max. I feel better when there are some spaces in our togetherness. It is the lack of this wall that frightens me. Without that space wall, the only safety for me is a leaving wall, which also scares me. Sometimes too much contact scares me. Okay, Alfred explained. So tell me, how did you two deal with this problem? Max looked up at Alfred and added, the space wall. The space wall, Alfred pronounced. Can you tell us more about the space wall, Max? And Max continued, the space wall protects my partner, not so much from me, but from her fear of too much contact. It also protects her from me in some sense. Simultaneously, it protects me from that dreaded leaving wall. I have found that if she has plenty of space, she does not need to go towards the leaving wall. The space wall is the wall that Alfred helped me build. It worked. Thank you, Max, the turtle said and continued. A little later in the class, we will cover techniques regarding the development of the space wall. One of them is a technique I call timeouts. That will be a little later. For now, I would like to give a little advice to anyone who feels they are the clinger partner in all of this. The best advice I can give you is to learn to enthusiastically create and support your partner's need for the space wall. This will reduce their need to move towards the leaving wall, the divorce wall, that is. Give them the benefits of leaving while they are with you, and learn to be happy when you are on your own. Learn to switch to the on your own mode quickly. The good news is that you can live with the space wall, that you can actually live alone here and there and give your partner the gift of less contact. The bad news is your partner cannot live without it. Without a strong, reliable, available space wall, they have to use the leaving wall. Not always fair, is it? But it's true. Alfred looked over at Max. Here are the tips I taught Max. You have to take over the primary care of your own neediness. You might as well consider yourself insatiable, but I'm here to tell you that you can live with it. Also, I want to be clear that this topic is the only one in these relationship skills where the solution seems one-sided. It seems unfair. I think it is, but I'd rather have the solution that is unfair than have no solution at all. Here it is. Whoever's the clinger at any time is the one who has to do the primary work. This is because the isolators, the defensive posture usually contains paralysis, blank minds, and the inability to do anything. When confronted, the isolator will freeze. In other words, their lizard will freeze. Sorry about this, but there will be little the avoider will be able to do. As the pursuer, it will be up to you to act. The good news is that as the pursuer, you can learn to switch, but also understand that the act of giving your partner the space wall will still not take care of your needs for connection. You will have to take care of that. This is what I have learned and how I solved my need for connection when my partner was not available. You see, I am on the clinger side myself, Alfred said, and boy, am I needy. I came to realize long ago that I am this way. I came out of my childhood needing lots and lots of attention. I can look back and hear voices of people complaining about how needy I was. When I finally began to understand this, I decided that I needed about 1,500 love units per day. This was not my fault. The excess neediness was my parents' business, but that's all in the past now. Now it's my problem. So here I am, needing lots and lots of love units each day, just like Max and my partner, Mrs. Turtle. Not so much. My wife came out of childhood with a very limited ability to produce love notice, kind of like Minnie. Her maximum on a good day is about 16 love units. Oh, she can work lots and accomplish many, many things, but when it comes to love units, not much. This isn't her fault. This limited capacity was her parents' business, but now it is her problem and my problem too, because I have been trying to get my needed 1,500 love units out of a 16 love unit source for years. So now, what? Alfred exclaimed. Well, in my case, I looked at the situation and looked at my options. First, my wife had the best loved units available. She just didn't have many of them, and I wanted every one of them that she could produce. Second, I can live alone. True, I'm kind of degraded when alone, but I can do it. In fact, when I travel for business, I take care of myself pretty well. Third, there are lots of love units in the world that I can get. I can get them from cats and dogs and horses and friends and clients and audiences, even people reading and listening to me like you. There are many sources. Still, among all these sources, my wife has by far the best quality of love units, just not that many. And thus, here is what I did. And I did it right in front of my partner. Alfred continued to speak with enthusiasm. First, I improved my ability to live alone. I looked at my time alone and started to do a better job. I noticed that when I had lived alone between my marriages, that I often did pretty well. I noticed that when I traveled for business, I often did pretty well. I just was not in the habit of doing well when I was near my partner. So I practiced doing better. When I traveled, I always had a good book available, so I learned to have a good book available at home also. Second, I improved my ability to get love units from other sources in the world. But, and this is a big but, never did I draw on a source that would threaten my partner. Remember, she had the best love units in town. I didn't want to ruin my chances of getting them. So, for me, this meant that I could get love units from anything or any group as long as they weren't single female turtles. I built up a network of friends. I joined volunteer organizations. I gave presentations. I kept up with my pets too. Third, I developed a super fast switch. This was a skill to be able to switch from my partner as a source to my living alone skills and back quickly. If I was with my friends and my partner had some to share, I would drop my friends and head home. If I was with my partner and she suddenly seemed to want quiet time, I would grab a book and start reading. I was stunned by the benefits of doing this. I mentioned that I did it right in front of my partner. My partner seemed relieved that I was doing it. She actively supported me. She told me about having so often felt a failure that she could not meet my needs. She began to relax around me, and guess what? Her output of love units began to increase. At this point, quite a few years since I started this plan, she can produce probably 300 love units without difficulty. Wow, they are those high quality love units I love so much. Now, they are still not as many as I want, but I found out something else. It was the reliability that made all the difference, not the number. My panic was much more driven by the fear that my sources would be cut off. Now, with my super fast switch, I was taking care of my reliability. My supply became fine. My strategy met my need for reliable and sufficient contact and met my partner's need for non-excessive contact. How cool is that? If I have one thing to say to Minnie, it would be to learn to firmly and gently make the space wall. Learn to anticipate your own needs for quiet and signal your partner when those needs are coming up. Learn to take timeouts. Tend to your partner's needs for reliability by showing that the space wall is not a leaving wall. Always refer to your returning when you start to move away. Alfred gazed over at Mimi and continued. The good news, Mimi, is that you get the space you need. The bad news is that you have to develop relationship responsibility. You can't blame your partner for your need for space. I know, said Minnie. As you know, Mimi, Alfred continued, it is essential to keep a sense of connection. Even when you need to get a break from your partner, let there be spaces in your togetherness, I say. That brings us to another important subject that I'd like to get going on right now, said the turtle. This is the developed skill of what I call timeouts. This is a good one. It's simple, but very good, so work to master these timeouts. A timeout is a relational tool and is an essential skill for any intimate relationship. The purpose of a timeout is to resolve pressure from the relationship, to remove pressure from the relationship. Use a timeout whenever you feel overwhelmed pressed, chased, pursued, or cornered, that sort of thing. Also, unit whenever your partner appears to be overwhelmed, pressed, chased, pursued, or cornered. The goal is to create and maintain a relaxed dialogical space with open self-communication going on. Only the pursuee, the one feeling pursued, really knows when a timeout is necessary. Treat timeouts as a necessity. Alfred backed up and started writing on the blackboard once again. Do not request them, announce and take them, he wrote. Alfred paused for a moment and laid down the chalk. He then reached up and pulled down a large graph that hung rolled up above the blackboard. This was a numbered chart that showed a series of steps. When he grabbed the chalk and proceeded to speak once again. What I'm about to explain to you is the procedure to take for taking a timeout. There are some steps, and I want you to understand them and integrate their use into your learned relationship skills. So here we go. A timeout must be non-negotiable. The following steps 1, 2, 3, 6, and 7 are mandatory. The other steps are nice. He continued by pointing to the chart and went through the steps one by one. Number 1, he said, is optional but ideal. The timeout requiring partner will give a warning that a timeout will be requested shortly. That would mean that when you begin to feel overwhelmed in the process of your conversation, you would say something like this. I'm going to need a timeout in about 5 minutes. Step 2, the timeout requiring partner gives a clear signal like holding your hands up and making a T as in football. Say the words timeout, indicating the need for a timeout. Now. Step 3, the responding partner stops all talking, all action, and waits. This is very important. Step 4, the timeout requiring partner states a period of timeout for the timeout. I need 2 hours. I need the rest of the night. This step signals that this timeout is taking place within the relationship and is not an exit from the relationship. Step 5, and this step is optional but ideal, so try to do it. The timeout requiring partner makes a note of what the responding partner was speaking of when the timeout was requested. Step 6, both partners separate and are silent until the timeout period is over. Alfred stopped speaking and turned suddenly. He looked around the room and then began once again. Since this must be non-negotiable, the responding partner is given a choice at this point. If you stop all talking and action, you will get a quiet time with your partner nearby. If you continue talking, you will get a quiet time with your partner out of the area, like driving off for a while. Either way, the requiring partner gets a timeout, a time of quiet. When you become good at silent timeouts, you can try just not talking about subjects that are distressing to either. Ideally, the timeout requiring partner reinitiates contact. If they didn't need so much time, they can connect sooner. If either partner needs more time, they announce this additional requirement when they return. The timeout requiring partner initiates dialogue about what caused them to request a timeout. The timeout requiring partner initiates continued dialogue on the subject interrupted by the timeout and noted in step 5. Alfred then stepped away from the chart. Too many steps, too technical you may think. The intention is to make this a natural, free-flowing process in your dialogue with your romantic partner. If you just practice this, it will become very natural in a short amount of time. As awkward as it may seem here, looking at this chart, in your real world of relationship, it can flow easily when used on a regular basis. Alfred took a moment for silence, a long breath as to clear the air and maybe to give an example of what a silent moment would feel like, then reinitiate the conversation. Typically, one partner will need more timeouts. The goal for this partner is to learn to state their needs with kindness and yet firmness. This may be quite difficult and be typically a growth edge for them. The other partner may need fewer timeouts, thus they will need to learn to put their eagerness on hold and to easily give timeouts and space on demand. This may be quite difficult for them and will be a part of their growth edge. Practice timeouts even when you do not really need them, until both of you and your partner get the hang of them. Initially, you will probably have to get out of each other's presence to make a timeout work. Sleep separately if you have to. Go to a hotel. Go for a drive. There are things you can do. As you practice more, you will probably be able to stay closer during this timeout period. Remember, the reason for a timeout is to get away from the stress in your relationship. If you're having an argument and you go out of control and slip into master talk with each other, if you start arguing and getting out of hand, you need to take a timeout. You'll know you need a timeout because you will not be able to control your words. You'll start to say things that you do not mean, and that will hurt you a lot more than taking a timeout. So, are you any closer to understanding these concepts behind reliable membership? These are just my opinions, mind you, the turtle said, but they are opinions I have worked on for many years. I hope they are helpful to you. That will be the end of today's class. I would like to thank Max Imizor and Minnie Imizor for participating in today's demonstration. You two have been quite helpful.